A secretive fleet of old, creaking ships sails through the world's waters, transporting Russian oil. These boats have shady ownership structures and are also used for spying. But who exactly is getting rich from these rusting tankers? And why are they so dangerous? The EU is ramping up measures to stop this ghost armada. But how do you stop a shadow fleet? Hundreds of dilapidated oil tankers linked to the Kremlin prowl the Baltic Sea and beyond, transporting Russian oil. The fleet sprung up after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and the country's oil sector was subject to strict sanctions. Since then, the number of ships has grown, and the fleet's activities have become even more blatant, prompting the EU to issue a new package of sanctions this week to stop Putin from filling his war chest. These sanctions come after the EU, the G7 and Australia agreed in 2022 to set a price cap of $60 on seaborne crude oil from Russia, as well as a ban on importing Russian oil. So Russia had to look elsewhere for clients. We spoke to Nathaniel Puthera, an investigative journalist who's been working on this story for the platform Follow the Money.
Since the war started in Ukraine, Russia had to use other methods in order to continue its oil exports after the European Union and allies put sanctions on their oil exports. And so they turned to methods used by Iran and used by Venezuela in the past, which was to take old vessels destined for the scrap heap and repurpose them as their own fleet of oil transporting ships.
Follow the Money's investigations found that these juddering vessels were suddenly being sold for more than they were worth. Just after the price cap was imposed in December 2022, there was a huge jump in sales of petrol tankers. So how does the shadow fleet function? It's thought to consist of around 600 tankers that cut their transponders to evade satellite surveillance. It's difficult to identify them visually because they fly under what are called flags of convenience from less scrupulous countries such as Panama, Liberia and Sierra Leone. These countries let ships register under shell companies in order to disguise the real identities of ship owners. These ghost ships leave Russia, usually cross the Baltic Sea, and then transfer their cargo to other ships in the middle of the sea, often off the coast of Greece or Malaysia. These new ships will then deliver the oil mostly to China and India, but also to Turkey and Malaysia. Some ships in the fleet also drag their anchors across the seabed to damage energy infrastructure or rupture underwater telecommunications cables. This armada of old oil tankers represent a major environmental risk to maritime environments, especially since they often operate without insurance in the event of an accident or oil spill. It's not just Russia making money off the shadow fleet. European shipping magnates and ship owners may have benefited too. In total revenue since 2023, German ship owners raked in $190 million, UK-based companies $590 million, and Greek ship owners $3.7 billion. Their defence, of course, is that they can't know what the ship they've sold will be used for, or to whom it could be resold. We spoke to Viktor Winkler, an expert on sanctions, to ask how the EU can stop Russia from finding workarounds. But first, let's hear again from Nathaniel Puthera.
There are multiple countries within Europe that, despite having sanctions against Russia, continue to help its shadow fleet to operate. This includes Ukraine, Latvia and Cyprus, who continue to have multiple crewing agencies that help supply seafarers to keep these ships running across the world. It also includes places like the UK, Germany, and Denmark, who have ship owners that have sold vessels to the shadow fleet in order to provide them with these ships that they require. Since the start of the war, the shadow fleet has been a huge benefit to Russia, allowing them to continue to export above the EU price cap to countries such as China and India. And it has allowed them to generate over 800 billion euros from fossil fuel exports.
Diese Sanktionen gegen die Schattenflotte effektiv zu machen, ja, muss man sie durchsetzen, aber vor allem sollte man Handreichung geben, Weisungen geben, Hinweise geben an die Unternehmen in der EU. Wie mache ich das? Wie halte ich diese Sanktionen ein? Da kommt bislang zu wenig von der EU. Das ist ein Riesenproblem. Also einer der wichtigsten konkreten Dinge, die die EU tun könnte und aus meiner Sicht müsste, ist einen Fragenkatalog den Unternehmen an die Hand zu geben. Was muss ich in die Lieferkette hinein, also gegenüber meinen Lieferanten, fragen? Denn dort lauern sozusagen die größten Gefahren in der Lieferkette, in den Geschäftsbeziehungen, wo man zunächst denkt, das hat ja gar nichts mit Russland-Sanktionen zu tun, aber oft werden gerade diese Geschäftsbeziehungen zur Umgehung von Sanktionen genutzt.
European companies end up buying Russian goods, if indirectly, because sanctioned oil tankers unload crude oil in ports in China and India, which can then sell the refined version back to the EU. The shadow fleet is increasingly causing security issues in European waters, and an altercation in the Baltic Sea in mid-May raised the stakes. On the 13th of May 2025, the Estonian Navy tried to intercept Jaguar, a sanctioned oil tanker. The ship was sailing without a flag and is suspected of belonging to Russia's shadow fleet. The ship's captain refused to cooperate and carried on towards Russian waters. Then a Russian jet appeared in the skies, violating European airspace for 1 minute, marking a new salvo in Russian provocation.
I want to highlight the importance of what happened in Estonia, where for the first time Russia responded to economic sanctions by members of the alliance with military action.
These cables carrying electricity and telecommunications between Finland and Estonia were damaged on the 26th of December 2024, while lying at the bottom of the Baltic Sea.
Power, we as society are not resilient anymore. We have no idea what to do. If we do not have internet, we cannot pay. So yeah, I think the impact is huge.
Experts believe it was a sabotage operation carried out by the oil tanker Eagle S dragging its anchor. Sailing under the Cook Islands flag, Eagle S is also suspected of belonging to the Shadow Fleet. On 15th of December last year in the Black Sea, oil began washing up on the coastline around the Russian resort of Anapa. The spill polluted 30 kilometers of beaches and harmed hundreds of birds and other local wildlife. The government declared a state of emergency. The oil came from 2 dilapidated tankers that had run aground. Though the ships openly flew Russian flags, they too were thought to be part of the Shadow Fleet, exporting oil illegally for Moscow's benefit. The Shadow Fleet threatens global marine ecosystems as well as European coastlines. The Baltic Sea and the North Sea are both rich in biodiversity, and an oil spill in a crowded shipping area would be catastrophic. The lack of insurance also means there won't be the money ready to contain a spill and minimise environmental damage. To limit the Shadow Fleet's operations, the EU adopted a new raft of sanctions against Russia on Tuesday, the 20th of May. A key feature of the new sanctions is the ban of nearly 200 ships in the Shadow Fleet from EU ports and trade, bringing it to a total of 342 tankers sanctioned by Brussels. And the EU doesn't intend to stop there.
We continue on working on the next strong package of sanctions to put more pressure on Russia so that they would also want peace.
The EU is looking to lower the price cap on Russian oil even further, a move that first has to be discussed by the G7. But will these sanctions be enough? We asked Viktor Winkler what he thought.
Ich würde sagen, mit dem neuen Paket wird die Schattenflotte zum ersten Mal so angegangen, wie sie angegangen hätte werden sollen von Anfang an. Die Frage bleibt, warum wurden die anderen Bestandteile dieser Schattenflotte bisher nicht erfasst? Insofern würde ich nicht sagen, es handelt sich um eine Verschärfung, sondern eher zum ersten Mal um ernstzunehmende Sanktionen in diesem Bereich. Diese Sanktionen haben die Chance, anders als leider viele andere Sanktionen, wirklich effektiv zu sein. Ich bin relativ zuversichtlich, dass dadurch der Betrieb der Schattenflotte zumindest sehr, sehr teuer werden wird für Russland und daher hier wirklich die Sanktionen Erfolge zeitigen werden. Das glaube ich schon, da bin ich relativ optimistisch.
Each day the Shadow Fleet continues to operate brings us closer to a major environmental disaster and prolongs the war in Ukraine. That's all for this show. Remember to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on social media. We'll be back next week with more news from around Europe. Goodbye, ciao, and au revoir.